This video is brought to you by Card Kingdom. Hey friends, I'm back with another budget gameplay video for you. Budget Omnath Locus of Creation. Omnath is the face of the latest set, Zendikar Rising, and has already been smashing to the top of the charts, not just in Commander, but in other formats as well. And for good reason. Omnath is the most powerful landfall commander ever printed. It's not only one of the most powerful landfall creatures ever made, jamming tons of power in just a 4 converted mana cost creature, but it's also 4 colors, which means having it as your commander gives you access to 4 colors worth of landfall and lands matters cards, whereas most landfall commanders only give you access to 2 or 3 colors. So yeah, Omnath Locus of Creation is the real deal, and our budget brew today is going to prove that. Our Omnath deck is a pretty straightforward landfall list. We've got a bunch of cards that trigger from lands entering the battlefield, drawing cards with Tatyova Benthic Druid, recurring permanents with Emeria Shepherd, growing plants with Phylath World Sculptor, and creating and growing a huge army with Felidar Retreat. To maximize the amount of landfall triggers we can get per turn, we've got tons of land ramp like Springbloom Druid and Roiling Regrowth, ways to bounce and replay our lands like Mina and Den Wildborn, and fetch lands like Evolving Wilds. So the idea is to put tons of lands into play, getting tons of landfall triggers, and overwhelm the table with a huge token army. It's simple but highly effective. The deck was initially $100 when I built it, but the price is dropping now since Zendikar Rising has been out for another week and supply is catching up to demand. Even on a relatively low budget, however, the deck practically builds itself and is bursting with raw power. I can't wait to give this deck a spin, so with the deck overview out of the way, let's hop into the game. Our first opponent is Karl Alfred, who I will call K, running Gishath's Sun's Avatar. Gishath is a dinosaur tribal deck, and despite having a shallow card pool to work with, the tribe can be surprisingly powerful, largely due to its explosive commander. Casting and attacking with Gishath can instantly turn an empty board into a lethal one filled with dinosaurs, a threat you have to respect. Our next opponent is AfroMagic17, who I will call Af, running Sisay Weatherlight Captain. Sisay is a powerful legendary tribal commander that repeatedly tutors into play legendary permanents to control the board and win the game. I've played against a lot of Sisay decks at this point, and half of them at this point also end up being Shrine Tribal decks, sometimes mixing in an Enchantress theme built around the shrines. And our final opponent is returning viewer TLUR, who I will call T, running Kel's Fight Fixer. Kels is a sacrifice commander, providing a huge card draw engine in the command zone. The idea is to sacrifice creatures for value, draw tons of cards, and eventually combo off and win the game off Blood Artist and similar cards. All 3 commanders pose a serious threat, but in terms of initial threat, I'd say the least threatening is Gishath, then Sisay, then Kels. Gishath decks definitely pose a threat, but the power ceiling of Dinosaur Tribal is lower than the rest, so I expect to deal with K last. Sisay decks can quickly snowball if Sisay is allowed to activate her ability multiple times, but if you take out the commander, the deck is pretty manageable. But Kels is a sacrifice deck, an incredibly deep archetype with a very high power ceiling, and T's previous decks have been powerful and expensive, so I assign them as enemy number 1. After using our free mulligan due to some awkward colorless lands, I draw another hand with more awkward colorless lands, which makes me immediately realize that Warped Landscape and the Panoramas suck in a 4-color deck, and post-game I will definitely be taking them out for basic lands instead. Despite the clunky lands, the Risen Reef and Murasa Rootgrazer are amazing early drops, so I keep this hand. Af wins a die roll and goes first. We all play our first lands and do nothing until turn 2, when T plays a Morphic Pool and casts the Mirror Signet. I awkwardly play a Simic Growth Chamber, bouncing a land and discard Spore Mound, which seems bad, but honestly our hand is looking insane once we can get Risen Reef on the battlefield, and unlike the Panoramas, I do love the Karus in our deck, even though they made us discard this time. K plays a Rootbound Crag and passes. Af plays an island and casts Eutropia the Twice Favored, which is an Enchantress card, so that makes me think this is a Shrine Enchantress deck. T plays one of my favorite islands and casts Dreadhorde Invasion and Altar of Dementia, which is kind of the perfect start for a sacrifice deck with their engine already set up on turn 3. I play a Blighted Woodland and cast Risen Reef, drawing Struggle to Survive. This is probably the best early drop in our entire deck since we happen to run a high amount of elementals and it's absolutely insane with the Zendkar's Royal in our hand. I cross my fingers hoping that Risen Reef survives a few turns, which would be absolutely insane for us. K plays an Unclaimed Territory and passes. Af plays a Plains and casts Sword of the Anime, which confuses me since it's not an enchantment. Then they equip Sword to Eutropia and hits T, ramping a Swamp. On T's upkeep, they amass a zombie token, then cast Ghostly Pilferer and Skullclamp the zombie to draw 2 cards. It's only turn 4 and T is running away with this game, threatening to snowball out of control with their busted card draw engines. We'll need to find an answer to their board and fast. On our turn, I silently curse our colorless lands for not letting us cast Zendkar's Royal this turn, and instead crack the Panorama for a mountain, play Selesnia's Sanctuary, bouncing Blighted Woodland, and hit K. I probably should have just played Warp Landscape and cracked the Blighted Woodland for 2 lands instead. A minor punt. K plays a Forest and passes. At this point, I'm convinced that they are slow rolling a board wipe, or I have no idea what their hand or deck looks like if they can't cast anything by now. Af casts Joyra Weatherlight Captain and plays and cracks a Terramorphic Expanse for a forest, then hits us with Eutropia, ramping a mountain. I guess maybe this isn't a Shrine Enchantress deck, and more of just a pile of good legendaries. On T's upkeep, they amass, play a Phyrexian Tower, Skullclamp the zombie to draw 2 cards, cast Bloodline Keeper, and hit K with the Pilferer. T is definitely miles ahead of the table at this point, but hopefully I can even things out. Risen Reef has managed to survive 2 turn cycles, and now we're finally ready to get some value off of it. I cast Zendkar's Royal, then play Blighted Woodland, creating an elemental token off the Royal, which triggers the Reef, drawing us Wargate. I was hoping for a land, but Wargate is excellent too. K plays a Cavern of Souls and finally casts their first spell, Regisaur Alpha. It seems they weren't slow rolling a board wipe, but rather just kept an incredibly slow hand. Af casts Sisay, triggering Pilferer to draw a card, then surprises me by casting Helm of Kaldra. It seems Af is a Magic player of culture, much respect. Then they hit T with Eutropia, ramping a mountain. T amasses, creates a vampire with Bloodline Keeper, then casts Teferi, Master of Time. They loot with Teferi, then cast Talisman of Dominance. T keeps getting ahead, but Risen Reef continues to survive, so we still have a chance to catch up. On our turn, I cast Omnath, Locus of Creation, triggering Pilferer to draw a card, and we draw a card and trigger Risen Reef. This time, Reef hits an island and puts it into play, triggering the Royal and Omnath. The Royal makes an elemental token, triggering Reef again, and we hit another land with Command Tower, triggering the Royal to make another elemental, which triggers Reef, hitting yet another land with Gruul Turf, triggering the Royal that triggers the Reef, and finally hits a non-land card, Sakura Tribe Elder. Omnath's landfall triggers resolve and we gain 4 life, make 4 mana, and deal 4 damage to each opponent and knock Teferi down to 1 loyalty. But we're not done yet. We play a mountain, making another elemental and drawing Valakut Exploration. Then we cast Wargate for X equals 4, but unfortunately T counters it with Swan Song. Still, that was an insane turn, and I'm hoping to do it all over again next turn as well. I then swing an elemental at Teferi, and T chumps with a zombie token. K plays Pillarverge Pathway and taps out. I am thoroughly confused. Then T loots with Teferi on end step. Af sinks all their mana into Kamal's Druidic Vow, where X equals 8. T responds by looting with Teferi. Vow then resolves, hitting 3 lands, Bow of Nylea, and Ravka-Passion Ship's Mage. Eutropia grows Sisay with a +1/+1 counter and hits us, ramping a Plains. T amasses, casts Kells, plays an island, returning Bloodghast to the battlefield, loots with Teferi, casts Phyrexian Altar, and casts Gravecrawler from the graveyard. At this point, they can sacrifice Gravecrawler to Phyrexian Altar for black mana, and use that mana to recast it for an infinite sacrifice loop, so they just need a third card like Blood Artist to make that loop lethal. Thankfully, they don't have the win just yet, so they Skullclamp Gravecrawler to draw 2 cards and pass. On our turn, we play Warped Landscape, doing our nonsense again, but before the Omnath triggers can resolve, T phases out Omnath with Teferi. I should have responded by cracking Blighted Woodland or Warped Landscape to fetch another land and trigger Omnath one more time to kill Teferi, but I didn't see that line and punted. Instead, I cast Phylath, World Sculptor, and swing a bunch of elemental tokens at Teferi. T blocks, sacrificing a bunch of blockers to draw more cards off Kells, and Teferi dies. Then I cast Struggle to kill Sisay, and then cast Survive to shuffle everyone's graveyards back into their libraries to get rid of T's Gravecrawler and Bloodghast. Then I cast Springbloom Druid, sacrificing a mountain to get more lands, trigger more landfall, more nonsense. Risen Reef finally bites the dust when K Path to Exiles it. Af plays Hammer of Purphoros, growing Eutropia, recasts Sisay, activates Sisay to get Gigantha the Wellspring, taps Gigantha for Wooburg mana and uses that mana to activate Sisay again, and gets Samut Voice of Dissent, which can also untap Gigantha for yet another Sisay trigger. At this point, Sisay can activate a minimum of 6 times per turn, which means that she must be dealt with this turn cycle, or else we probably lose. Then Af hits us with Eutropia and ramps an island. T amasses on upkeep, taps Bloodline Keeper to create a vampire, casts Reefworm, Skullclamps it to draw 2 cards, exiles Phylath with Reality Shift, Skullclamps the zombie token to draw 2 more cards, casts Zulaport Cutthroat, and sacrifices the fish to Phyrexian Altar to ramp out Bitter Blossom. With 8 cards in hand and a ton of card draw potential next turn, it's likely that T can find the missing combo pieces like Gravecrawler again and win the game off Infinite Drain next turn. So yeah, we have 2 opponents who are very likely to win next turn. On our turn, we're in a weird spot since we don't have any removal to stop either Af or T from potentially winning the game on their turns. So I start by casting Prime Speaker Zegana. Af makes my life easier by activating Sisay in response to grab Hero's Podium, so I'm clear to do whatever I want this turn. Zegana draws us 9 cards, but unfortunately we don't find any permanent removal, so I decide on plan B, player removal. I cast Retreat to Emeria, bring to light fetching Yasharn Implacable Earth to shut down T's ability to sacrifice, pump my army up and swing everything at Af, killing them. I had enough to swing some at T too, but math is for blockers, aka I punted again. K, having been a bystander all game long, finally makes a big impact by casting Winds of Abandon with Overload, exiling all opposing creatures. Now this definitely hurts, but I do get to fetch out my remaining 9 basic lands from my deck, creating 18 creature tokens off the Royal and Retreat, which should still be quite threatening. Plus, I can Reap the Past to return my entire graveyard back to hand next turn, which should be more than enough gas to close out this game. On T's turn, they amass, then they do the absolute worst thing against us. They cast Windfall, wheeling our game-winning hand away from us. Now things are looking very bad. With no more basic lands in our entire deck, half the cards in our hand don't even do anything. Then T clamps their zombie to draw 2 cards, casts Nether Trader and clamps it for 2 more cards, casts Sol Ring and Felwar Stone, clamps the Fairy to draw 2 more cards and return the Trader, cast Aura Thief, sacrifice it to the Phyrexian Altar to steal Zendikar's Royal and retreat to Emeria, then wipes the board of all creatures with Toxic Deluge. At this point, T is very much ahead, and we are very much running out of options. On our turn, I cast Radha, Heir of Keld, Omnath, Locus of Creation, Tireless Tracker, Explore, Urban Evolution, Hull Breach to remove Skullclamp and Zendikar's Royal, Cycle Migration's Path, and pass Keeping Up Nature's Claim and Negate. If I can manage to keep my 3 creatures alive, then there's a small chance we can still win this. Kay plays a Prismatic Vista and casts Marauding Raptor. Then they finally cast Gishath, hitting T and getting Godzilla, Wayward Swordtooth, and Temple Altasar. Then they play a Rogue's Passage and cast Sol Ring. At this point, there's nothing I can do about Kay's board, and they're probably going to kill either me or T next turn. On T's turn, they make a Fairy and Zombie token, then they cast Necrotic Ooze. With the Scarab God in their graveyard, they can use the Ooze to copy Scarab God's activated ability, and start making zombie token copies of all the creatures in everyone's graveyard, which is exactly what they start doing, making a copy of Regisaur Alpha, Reef Worm, and Ameria Shepherd. At this point, I pull the trigger on Nature's Claim and blow up Phyrexian Altar to cut down some of their potential mana, but at this point, it doesn't matter. They sacrifice a bunch of creatures to Altar of Dementia and mill me out, killing me on my draw step and leaving themselves dead to Kay. And just to rub it in, Kay finishes the game in style with Wakening Sun's Avatar, killing all of T's creatures so the dinosaurs can bash in unopposed. Now that was a wild game. Everyone got to do some incredibly powerful things. It also goes to show that even if you're way behind the rest of the table, in a multiplayer game, there's always a chance that you can still snag the victory if your opponents leave you alone and deplete all their resources, killing themselves. As for my deck, I'm really happy with how it performed. Obviously, a lot of its success this game was tied to Risen Reef, which is incredibly busted here, but the deck is filled with other powerful cards as well despite its $100 budget. There are some changes I'll be making though. The biggest change will be removing the panoramas and warped landscapes. I thought they'd be good in the deck as additional landfall triggers, but turns out they're terrible. They're too slow and tapping for colorless is just awful in a 4-color deck. I'm going to replace them for more basic lands instead. I've also added more removal with cards like Sylvan Reclamation, and 2 more finishers with Multani, Yavimai's Avatar, and Treacherous Terrain. I think the end result is an incredibly powerful and well-rounded deck at this price point. And that's it for Budget Omnath Locus of Creation. I hope you enjoyed this abridged gameplay, and if you'd like to watch these games live, then you can catch my streams here on YouTube Wednesdays at 6 PM Eastern Time. So come join me as I punt in real time, and you can chat with me or even play against me. That's all I got for now, so until next time friends, see ya! Thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, help us out by clicking the like button down below. And to keep up with the latest and greatest, make sure to click the subscribe button. And if you want to watch similar videos, click on the links appearing on screen right now.